At this point, it's helpful to overlay a ministry-oriented framework on the life cycle, the idea of APEST giftings and their seasonality. APEST stands for apostles, prophets, evangelists, shepherds, teachers, drawn from Ephesians 4, often discussed as the fivefold ministry gifts Jesus gives to the church. The research suggests that these different types of leaders or voices tend to rise to prominence at different stages or in different challenges. It makes intuitive sense. The kind of leadership a brand new church plant needs is not identical to what a 50-year-old denomination in need of reform requires. Each of the APEST roles has a distinct focus. Apostles are the sent ones, pioneers who extend the mission, start new works, and keep the church oriented outward. They are entrepreneurs in a sense, always pushing to new territory, ensuring the community doesn't get complacent or inward-looking. Prophets are the questioners and truth-tellers. They attune to God's will and the covenant, often pointing out where the community is straying from its values or where injustice and sin are festering. They help the church maintain integrity and alignment with God's holiness and compassion, even if their messages are sometimes uncomfortable. Evangelists are the recruiters to the cause. They share the good news with contagious enthusiasm and draw new people in. They ensure the community isn't just living for itself, but is constantly welcoming and incorporating new folks, expanding the circle. Shepherds, pastors, are the caregivers, developers of people. They create a safe environment, nurture relationships, and walk with people through growth and pain. They make sure the community has cohesion, health, and that individuals are seen and tended to. And teachers are the explainers and trainers. They take truth and make it understandable, help people learn and grow in knowledge and wisdom, and they guard the doctrinal core, ensuring that what is passed on is sound and deep. In a full, healthy expression, the church or organization has all five operating together, keeping it balanced. But in practice, in certain seasons, one or two might need to take the lead. Think about the birth of a ministry, a new church, a new mission team. Apostles and evangelists are often the catalytic force. You need that apostolic drive to say, let's go, let's start something where nothing exists yet. God is sending us. And the evangelistic edge to gather people, to proclaim the vision in a way that gets buy-in and brings new people to faith or to join the cause. Prophets in that early stage ensure the foundation is solid, that the effort is truly rooted in God's direction and not just human ambition, and they might challenge the fledgling group to remember the poor, or to maintain prayerfulness, or to avoid compromise. Shepherds and teachers are probably present too, we hope, even in a small church plant. But their full importance will show a little later once there are actually flocks to tend and doctrine to systematically teach. Now, move to the growth and building phase. As the community gets established, shepherds and teachers often take on a greater visible role. New people need pastoral care. Structures of discipleship and education need to be built. Here the teacher's gift shines, laying foundations of sound teaching, catechism, theology, or training. Shepherds create community bonds so that people just attracted by the evangelist actually stick around and grow roots. Evangelists keep doing their thing, bringing more in, but they might now be working in tandem with teachers and shepherds to assimilate and integrate people. Apostles at this stage might start chafing a bit. A classic pattern is that the church planters, apostolic types, often, after some years of stability, feel drawn to go start something new again, because maintaining and nurturing an established community can feel confining to them. If they stay, hopefully their pioneering drive is redirected to launching new ministries or sites, or pushing the church to continue expanding outward. Prophets during growth may start to function as a kind of quality control and conscience. Yes, we're growing, but are we deepening? Are we addressing sin? Are we keeping our reliance on God or coasting on human momentum? Those are prophetic questions that need asking precisely when things are going well, and you might be tempted to get proud or just focus on numbers. Now, consider an organization in maturity, or even drift. Perhaps it's comfortable, large, and maybe a bit stuck or internally conflicted. At such a time, the prophets often become critical voices. Maybe people on the margins who start saying, "We've lost our first love," or "We preach grace but don't live it," or "We're ignoring pressing needs in our community while patting ourselves on the back." Prophets often spark or accompany seasons of renewal and reform. However, they can be unwelcome in a complacent environment, so whether they're heard or not is a big factor in whether renewal happens. If the organization drifts without prophetic correction, it might face crisis. In crisis, guess who might step up? Often, apostolic leaders reemerge or are needed to refound or redirect the organization. Sometimes, a new apostolic leader, not necessarily meaning a formal title, apostle, but someone with that gifting, is brought in to shake things up. Or an internal figure with apostolic vision gains influence to say, "Let's refocus on the mission. Here's a new direction we must go to respond to the times." That is essentially launching a fresh curve, almost like going back to the founding stage, but in a new context. Also, during conflicts or transitions, shepherds are extremely important to keep people cared for, to heal wounds, to maintain unity while changes happen. And teachers ensure that even if methods change, the theology stays anchored and people understand the why behind changes. So, over a full life cycle, you might see apostolic spark at the start, shepherding, teaching, building stability, prophetic challenge provoking recalibration, and apostolic leadership again to break into a new season, with evangelistic pulses every time you reach outward, and shepherding, teaching again as you consolidate each new phase. It's very cyclical and dynamic. The phrase apest gift seasonality reminds us not to lock our leadership structure into just one or two of those functions forever. Many churches unfortunately do. For instance, a lot of traditional churches basically only recognize shepherds and teachers in leadership, and they sideline apostles, calling them troublemakers or thinking they're just entrepreneurial secular types. They silence prophets, too divisive, too radical, and maybe they let the evangelists operate occasionally, but keep them limited. Don't bring too many messy new people at once, please. The result is an organization that is very stable, but maybe stagnant and inward-focused. On the flip side, a group that only has apostles and prophets leading without shepherds and teachers might be fiery and bold, but could end up theologically off track, hurtful to people, or simply burning out because of poor care and structure. Seasonality means at different times, you hand the reins to different gifts as context requires, while still honoring all five in an ongoing way. It could even be formal. Some churches in times of planting or major outreach have an apostolic or evangelistic pastor leading the charge, then later bring in a strong teaching pastor to ground the congregation, etc. Or it could be more internal. In your core team meetings, you intentionally cycle who sets the agenda. Sometimes let the prophet speak first and call out issues. Other times, let the teacher bring forward the curriculum plan. Sometimes ask the evangelist what they're hearing from the unchurched. Often let the shepherd voice concerns about member care. And ensure the apostle is always reminding everyone of the greater mission beyond comfort. When change hits, say a conflict or a drop in giving, maybe convene a sort of apest council. What are each of you seeing from your gifting? Prophet, what's God saying to us in this? Shepherd, how are the people handling it? Evangelist, is there a gospel opportunity hidden in this challenge? Teacher, what scriptures should guide us right now? Apostle, where can we go from here that we haven't considered? That might sound a bit idealized, but in practice it can be as simple as asking those different-minded folks to speak into decisions, which unfortunately many leadership teams neglect, often because teams are not diverse in gifting. The bottom line, different gifts will shine at different stages and situations. Wise leaders make room for that and even anticipate the transitions. At this point, let's crystallize the insights so far into some practical frameworks you can carry with you. I'm going to outline 3 interconnected frameworks that emerge from this integrated approach. 1. A diagnostic matrix linking personality gifting mix to an organization's life cycle stage. 2. A toggle decision guide for when to lean constrained versus unconstrained in leadership stance. And 3. A burden of proof reallocation rubric to know when to switch the default from status quo to change. These might sound a bit like consulting tools, but think of them as mental models to aid your discernment. First, the diagnostic matrix of personality gifts versus life stages. Picture a table in your mind. One axis is the life cycle of the organization. Roughly, startup or pioneer stage, growth or expansion stage, maturity or management stage, and renewal or reinvention stage, which could lead back to growth. The other axis is the composition of people and gifts. On this axis, you might list categories like apostolic, prophetic, evangelistic, shepherding, teaching gifts, or creative visionaries versus operational executors, or working genius types, etc. Now fill in what combination is ideally present or needs emphasis at each intersection. For example, at the startup stage, you want a high concentration of entrepreneurial personality and gifting. That means people high in openness to experience, comfortable with risk and ambiguity, perhaps those Patterson would call conceivers and finders, and strong apostolic and prophetic impulses in the leadership. You likely also want at least 1 or 2 evangelistic personalities early on to begin drawing others. Shepherds and teachers may be present, but in the background ready to catch the first fruits. The working genius likely to dominate the very start. Wonder and invention geniuses, with some discernment to shape the idea. If you have only grinders and preservers at the startup stage, the endeavor may never lift off. It'll get bogged in analysis paralysis or fear of the unknown. So for a church planter, a quick self-check could be, do I have enough high openness, apostolic types around me? If not, can I partner with or recruit some? At the growth stage, you've proven the concept, and now it's about scaling and improving. Here you still need innovation, but in a balanced way. In terms of personality, you'd want a mix. Keep some of those open, inventive folks to continue adapting, but you also need conscientious, organized people, maybe the keepers and minders from the thinking wavelength, to build systems and ensure quality. Gift-wise, this is when evangelists should be really engaged to maximize reach, and shepherds and teachers should start structuring discipleship and care. If you diagnose that your growth stage organization is plateauing, ask, do we have the right mix? Maybe you grew initially with a few high-energy evangelists, but now things are chaotic. Bringing in a teacher to lay down solid training or a keeper-type manager could stabilize growth so it can continue. Or vice versa. Maybe growth slowed because all energy went to organizing and you lost the apostolic edge, so re-inject some pioneer spirit for the next expansion. Working genius here. Invention and discernment are still needed for problem solving, but galvanizing, enablement, and tenacity become very important to rally the troops and lock in execution and consistency as you expand. At the maturity management stage, the organization is established. Now the temptation is to lean almost entirely on shepherds, teachers, and operational managers, grinders, minders, lots of enablement and tenacity geniuses making the machine run. And indeed, these roles are critical at this stage. They keep things faithful, stable, and efficient. You might say the center of gravity shifts to conscientious personalities, to pastors, teachers, to process and quality control. However, and this is vital, if you only have those, maturity slides into stagnation. So the matrix at maturity might say, maintain a base of shepherding and teaching to preserve health, but intentionally keep some apostles and prophets in the mix to question and to push into the next horizon. It's like a controlled tension. The teacher ensures orthodoxy while the apostle asks, who are we not reaching yet? The shepherd ensures people are cared for while the prophet asks, are we caring about the right things and the right people, or just ourselves?
This prevents the comfortable glass house syndrome.
If you realize your mature organization has basically systematically excluded or phased out all the pioneer personalities, they either left or were sidelined, that's a red flag. It means you're poised for decline because no one is carrying the torch for innovation internally. So, diagnose. Are there voices at the table who represent that founder's mentality still? If not, you might need to bring someone in or invite someone back in. At the renewal stage, or when attempting reinvention, the organization has recognized the need to change, maybe due to stall out or external change. Here, the matrix lights up again on the entrepreneurial side. You elevate apostolic and prophetic gifts and creative risk-takers to lead the renewal. They'll probably form a kind of vanguard or skunkworks team, as mentioned earlier. This might even feel like a return to startup culture, but within a more complex environment. Shepherds and teachers still play a role, perhaps taking care of the core while the new stuff is incubated, or preserving core values. But they might not lead the change. They support it and ensure continuity of what must not be lost. It's important in renewal to publicly bless those pioneer types so that the late majority folks in the organization see that leadership endorses this new move. If a church is reinventing itself, the congregation needs to know that the new ideas aren't rogue. They're actually sanctioned and sent by the leadership, which ideally includes those who are advocating for them. Also, be mindful of personality dynamics in renewal. Some longtime members or staff with very conscientious or stability-oriented wiring might struggle deeply during reinvention. They may even choose to exit or retire if it's too much change. That's okay. Handle that with pastoral care, but it's something to expect. Conversely, some folks who were earlier seen as misfits, too idealistic, or not fitting the established mold, might suddenly become crucial leaders in the new thing. The stone the builders rejected becomes the cornerstone type of scenario. The matrix helps you foresee that and normalize it. Yes, in this season, a different mix of people will be at the forefront. Next, let's articulate the toggle decision guide for constrained versus unconstrained approaches. This is more of a decision-making heuristic. The guiding question is, given the challenge or opportunity in front of us, should we approach it with a bias toward prudence, constrained vision, or a bias toward bold experimentation, unconstrained vision? Think of it as a little flow check, or at least points to consider when you're at a crossroads. One factor: the level of existential risk versus the level of missional opportunity. If something poses an existential risk to core mission or values, you might lean constrained, meaning be very careful, perhaps requiring high certainty and taking small steps. For example, if someone proposes a change that could affect core doctrine or the trust people place in the church's integrity, that's not where you want to be flippantly innovative. You'd weigh that heavily, test it thoroughly, maybe even say, the burden of proof is strongly on the change to demonstrate it won't compromise our fundamental convictions. The constrained vision there protects what must not be lost, the precious deposit of faith, in Paul's language. On the other hand, if you see a missional opportunity that is outside the bounds of current operations, say an unreached group or a social need the church has never engaged, then the cost of inaction is high in terms of kingdom impact. Here, the guide might encourage an unconstrained approach. Dream big about how to meet that need, because doing nothing would mean failing in our outward mission. Another factor: organizational health and resources. If your community is in a season of strength, unity, and you have some surplus, energy, money, time, you might decide it's a good time to take an unconstrained shot at something new. You can afford some failure and learn from it. Conversely, if the community is fragile, wounded, or resources are very tight, you may need to shore up stability first, a constrained, careful approach, before taking big swings. It's a bit like tending to a patient. A healthy patient can try an experimental new therapy with some confidence. A very ill patient might need to stabilize with proven treatments before risking something novel. Another dimension: time sensitivity. If an opportunity or threat has a narrow window, you may not have the luxury of slow consensus, building and incrementalism. You lean unconstrained, act decisively, with prayer of course, but quickly. If time is not a huge factor, you can be more constrained and methodical. Finally, consider the level of certainty and clarity you have from God and wise counsel. There are moments when through prayer, scripture, and counsel, you have a high degree of conviction that a certain bold path is the right one, even if it seems humanly risky. That might tip you toward taking that path, unconstrained by conventional analysis, since you trust God's leading. But in other cases, if everything is murky and you're unsure, a constrained step-by-step trial might be better than an all-in gamble. This toggle guide isn't a checklist that gives a binary answer, but it frames the discernment. Perhaps you literally discuss in leadership, is this a moment that calls for boldness or caution? Let's make the case for both and see which is compelling. Because sometimes organizations get stuck in one gear. Some default to caution always, some default to boldness always, and both can be problematic. The guide forces a conscious choice. A church that's always cautious may miss their Esther moment to act. A church that's always in crisis mode, leaping at ideas, may fail to ever consolidate and mature. A toggle mentality says both modes have merit. Wisdom is aligning mode to situation. So maybe you develop a practice. When an idea is proposed, initially brainstorm it in an unconstrained way. No limits. What could this be, like a mini visioning exercise? Then switch and analyze in a constrained way. What are the costs, risks, practicalities? Then weigh the outputs. Or at a strategic planning retreat, maybe label some initiatives as requiring a bold approach and some as requiring incremental approach. This helps communicate expectations to the team too. If it's a bold initiative, they know we're trying something that might fail, but we deem it worth the risk. If it's an incremental improvement, they know steadiness is valued, and dramatic moves aren't the goal there. Finally, the burden of proof reallocation rubric. We discussed conceptually how the burden can shift as a system becomes more obviously in need of change. The rubric formalizes that into stages, which can help communicate to stakeholders why you're changing your approach. You might articulate it in 3 broad stages: status quo stage, parity stage, and change mandate stage. In the status quo stage, the implicit rule is, we will continue doing what we're doing unless a strong case is made to change. This is appropriate when things are going well, or at least adequately, or when continuity is important for stability. Leaders in this stage should still encourage feedback and ideas, but those proposing major changes know they need to gather evidence, supporters, and a clear plan to justify it. For instance, a ministry that's serving its purpose decently would be in this mode. If someone wants to overhaul it, they need to show why. In the parity stage, there's an acknowledgement that what we've been doing and what we could be doing are at least equal contenders. The organization admits that status quo isn't obviously superior. There are some issues or some new opportunities that put a question mark over whether we should change. So now, when new proposals come, they are given equal weight to the existing way. Think of it like saying, we'll evaluate options on their merits, not automatically favoring the old way. This might happen after some modest declines in effectiveness or after observing others' success with different methods. At this stage, pilot projects and experiments are really valuable because they can tip the evidence. It's a bit of a fluid time, lots of discussion, comparison, maybe healthy debate between traditionalists and innovators, but ideally done with a shared sense that we all want whatever is best for the mission. A leader might facilitate this stage by creating task forces or research groups to explore alternatives and report back, essentially gathering proof one way or the other. Then, the change mandate stage is when it flips. The evidence is in, or the situation is dire enough, that the default is now, We must change unless someone convinces us otherwise. Reaching this stage might be triggered by clear data, e.g., 5 years of decline in participation, or the community we serve has dramatically different needs now, or by external mandate, like new laws or a crisis that force change. Here, the leadership openly communicates, doing nothing is no longer an option. We will change, now the question is how. It doesn't mean throwing caution to the wind, but it means that proposals to keep the status quo face a very high bar. They must show either that the decline can be turned around without major change, or that the risks of change are worse than the certain slow death of not changing. Usually, at this point, even those who prefer the old way start to see the writing on the wall. In church terms, sometimes this is a spiritual wake-up as well, like realizing, we're not fulfilling our mission anymore, we're just going through motions. That conviction galvanizes people to be willing to try something new. A practical tip for using this rubric is communication. Let your people know where things stand. If you believe you've moved from stage 1 to stage 3, say so in a visionary yet sensitive way. Folks, the world around us has changed dramatically, and our current approach is not reaching people like it used to. We thank God for all He's done through it, but we now have to innovate. We no longer ask, why change, but rather, how can we not change given the need? This is our Esther 4:14 moment. For such a time as this, we must step forward. That kind of clear statement helps everyone recalibrate their expectations. And it gives cover to those who might have been afraid to suggest changes. Now they know the leadership expects and desires new ideas. Meanwhile, those who are inherently change-averse at least know that the leadership isn't change for change's sake, but change for the sake of mission, which can help them get on board, or at least refrain from obstructing.